All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom. Once again, you've crossed over into the unexpected cosmology. Now, do me a favor, for those of you not actually listening in the Discord right now, but do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, you know the drill. And a great way to support what we're doing here at the Unexpected Cosmology, by the way, is to simply leave a quick comment below in YouTube land, like Shalom from Timbuktu, or greetings from the Wachowski family in Greenland. I don't know, I just made that up. Just quick comments, just say hello. I'd love to hear from you guys. Don't need all the crickets. I'm thankful to those also who send me juicy information all throughout the week. People email me. I leave that in the description box. So here on Discord, the things you've gleaned recently on your latest reconnaissance mission in the Matrix, and a lot people, they'll send me information and then maybe they expect me to do something with it like within a week or 2 or 3 weeks, and then when I don't, they stop sending it. But I'm telling you that, sometimes these things takes months. Sometimes I have a piece of information like this is really good and I don't know what to do with it. And then something else comes along. I'm like, boom, there it is. And I connect them. And so this is a collective effort. I do thank you all for doing that. And consider joining the TUC family here at Discord if you haven't already. And it's great to see so many faces, old faces, new faces as well. One last thing before we begin, TUC membership. This month, in the last couple days, Rebecca has sent out our latest book of the month. It is The Hidden Wilderness. This is the TUC book club membership exclusive. It's not going to be hitting the stores for probably till June. So it kind of give everyone the heads up. It's coming out eventually, but if you would like it this month, you can join anytime this month. We'll send it to you. Next month, the same. It's going to be another exclusive. The month after that, it's going to be another exclusive. And it's one of the benefits to being able to support this ministry. And, it supports the ministry, but you also get these reads in return. And as you all know, I really value old books and information that can be read. So that's why we do it. All right. So this is here on page 1. It's called The Mud Flood. As you can see, the date there, 5/5/2020. I'm taking you guys back to the COVID lockdowns. Dun, dun, dun. I wrote it in the I wrote it right in the midst of the lockdowns, and I'm starting to have this like nostalgic feeling towards 2020. I don't know why, but it was like such an intense year, and so many of us, we were at home, we weren't leaving because of why, and because of tyranny, of government tyranny, and we were just learning, we were just bringing information, and people were waking up. Well, I wrote this paper back then, the Mud Flood, and I've never presented it to you. This is the one I came out about the Mud Flood, and I've updated it since. So this is kind of like a Mud Flood 101 course. We're going to get through this, and then we're going to start tacking on new information, and you'll see why I'm doing this. So we'll be talking about Mud Flood in Jerusalem and the Whore of Babylon and other things like that. So anyways, the Mud Flood by yours truly, Noel Joshua Hadley. The Mud Flood happened, coming to terms with the human reset. Hopefully you've all come to terms with that by now, but you figure somebody out there listening has not. So this is for that one person. This is for you. The Mud Flood happened. Best to come to terms with that fact now for that one person out there. For the remainder of this read, I am more than happy to play the part of the tour guide and show you the hidden reality buried beneath us. You have been warned, though. The implications are glaring. We have been lied to again. His story has been hidden from us. Therefore, it is not, nor will it ever be, my intention to convince you that it happened. Many will kick and scream and only move forward should somebody drag them by the hair, but I refuse to do that. Debates are elementary. Sometimes a gentleman scholar simply offers to hold the door open, which is precisely what is happening at this very moment. At the very least, it can be said that you noticed, and so here is your offer. It is entirely up to you to walk through. More than anything, the invitation is for you to grab a shovel, as a dig site can be found on the other side of the door. Somebody stubbed their toe on something, you see. That's nearly always how these things begin. And so let's get our boots muddy and start uncovering the truth together. What I probably should have written for a title is The Millennial Kingdom of Messiah Happened rather than Mud Flood, now that I think about it. The article you are reading originally made no such suggestion. It was only 2 or 3 paragraphs long and basically declared what was already written in the present title that we needed to come to terms with the mud flood. But like I said, even I hadn't come to terms with it yet. I'm not talking in the spiritual sense either. No, here at the Unexpected Cosmology, I don't deal in sappy Hallmark cards or metaphors. It physically happened on the Earth in real time. The buried buildings across the motionless plane help to illustrate the claim being made by me, by Moy. Coming to terms with that likelihood didn't happen overnight, though. It took an entire year of investigating the mud flood before I was willing to go with my gut instincts and declare my intent to investigate the literal reign of Yahushua HaMashiach as already having happened upon this earth. Some of you in this room right now were here for that. When I finally started coming out and saying, hey, I think we need to look into this. If you are wondering where that pits us on the timeline, we would be those souls inhabiting the short season. Sounds legit if you ask me. Look around. We're being lied to about everything. I don't think there was any other time in all of history where people were being lied to like we are right this very moment. Once more, the aim of my writings is not to convince you that the millennial kingdom of Messiah happened upon the earth. I mean, I believe it went down, or else I wouldn't have written a book on the subject. And if you're wondering why I put that there, it's because it's going to be the introduction of a new second edition and so on and so forth. A literal and physical 1,000-year reign with Yahushua HaMashiach holding the scepter. That is why the mud flood is so important to the discussion. It serves as a divider of sorts, a mile marker. The mud flood was a reset, more like a series of interconnected resets intended to erase the millennial kingdom of Messiah from our consciousness so that Hasatan could go about doing his work. Perhaps you have come to the same conclusions as I have. If so, then awesome. Woot woot. But whether someone agrees or disagrees with my position is not cause for losing any sleep at night. Some people are simply imprisoned within their denominations or doctrines, and they have arrived with an agenda to feel comfortable again. It is what it is. That is why I started out saying I am under no obligation to forcibly remove someone from their paradigm. All I can do is greet people at the exit sign. So rather than convincing anyone of anything, I am merely interested in showing some of my findings in Scripture as well as the natural world. I too was loaded with questions at one time. That is, when confronted with the mud flood reset and the lost civilization which thrived before it. I still am. There is much that I will never know. I've accepted that fact. I'm good with it. But that is not to say inquiries have not been answered. Rewards are bestowed upon the diligent seeker of truth. Indeed, I have uncovered much while cracking open the books of old, and in doing so, resolved many conflicts in my mind. This is a brand new frontier in the field of research. It's cutting edge. If I were expected to come up with all the answers and solve every riddle, then this book, which there's a link right there, would likely never be offered. What you're about to read, or perhaps not read, is my road to discovery. Now, despite traveling on repeat trips through Deutschland, I have not yet had the pleasure of visiting Berlin, partially because of where it's placed on the map. It's a capital city there in Germany. Berlin was once revered as one of Europe's most beautiful cities. And it is now considered by many to be a mostly reimagined, though uninspired metropolis rebuilt upon the mounds of rubble left over from Allied bombing during the Second World War. In fact, that's an issue across Germany. When they had to rebuild it, they're like, are we going to rebuild it like the old world or rebuild it like the new world? It's called a Schuttberg, is the word the Germans would use to describe a mound made of a rubbish heap, which is what Berlin is essentially built upon. Debris hills of destruction. Makes sense. The Holocaust was, with a capital H, maybe a fictionalized, though necessary, event for anybody who wishes to conjure the Z in Zionism, and the Nuremberg trials, a New World Order kangaroo court. But the fall of the Third Reich is a well-documented event. A hell of a lot of TNT was dropped over Deutschland as well as the Empire of Japan. Berlin buried is not disputed. The evidence is there to show for it. Well, so is a worldwide mud flood event. The evidence is everywhere. You'd have to be walking around with your eyes wide shut not to see it. And what I'm talking about here is that you can go to Berlin. Again, I said that I've never been to Berlin, but I am told that if you go to Berlin, you will see a series of hills. Like the city is built on these hills because that's the destroyed city underneath. Admit it, you've walked up and down lonely avenues such as these your entire lives. You've passed repurposed buildings posing as libraries and others which go by false identities such as Gothic Revival. After noting the buried windows and doors in your peripheral vision and wonder who in their right mind would start the foundation of a building with only half of a or a third of a story or less, you push the uncomfortable feeling aside into the back alley of your consciousness with the thought of a movie or a New York Times bestseller or the two planes that magically toppled three buildings on 9/11, anything Illuminati sponsored. Old buildings. Buildings not yet 2 centuries old, they claim, or older. Buildings with partially buried windows and doorways, some of which are completely bricked over. And you walked right past them. Architects had weird hang-ups, you told yourself. You thought about your job and your slave debts incurred from the corporate government you call a country and serve, anything to ignore the irregulations on the slave plantation, glitches in the matrix. Oh, but haven't you heard? They're daylight windows. The Victorian people had a body habit of building oddly placed entrances leading to nowhere so as to add a little sunlight and storybook imagination to an otherwise dark room. More recently, as taking construction digs, such as this one, the picture shown here, to bring the lies of Illuminati indoctrination literature to light, particularly among the Nuh-uh people. How do you explain a row of townhouses such as this? Seriously, I would like to know. Just look at those doorways. Some of the original doors remain. Others have been bricked in. You will tell me it is only one construction site, and so, then you are wrong. Yes, there is a single row of houses being documented. We can both see that. These pictures are representative of a phenomenon which can be found all across the motionless plane and on every continent. Pick any centuries-old metropolis, Moscow, because there's a lot in Moscow, London, New York, Boston, Seattle, Oklahoma City, Denmark, Shanghai, Cairo. I could show you hundreds of photos to illustrate my point. No, thousands. But why bother? You know precisely what I'm talking about. You've all seen it. You've seen such scenery for the entirety of your lives, just like the flat horizon. Refresh your memory if need be. Close your eyes and visualize the following again. A row of bottom floor windows partially buried below ground level. Or how about this? A street level staircase which leads the resident downwards in order that he might enter in to the establishment. The buried stories of old have been right before our eyes this entire time. A multitude of other city streets reveal the same results. In every instance so far shown, it takes construction workers to unveil the illusion. I am explaining how the magic trick is performed now so that you will better appreciate the sleight of hand as performed by the tippy tops of doors and windows a little later on. Up until now, we were probably not ready for the implications. Most never will be, seeing as how Illuminati and Zionist literature speak nothing of it. The only explanation yet given to me by the Gregorian spokesman comes by way of quote-unquote observable science. You see, the accumulation of dirt and debris outside your house apparently adds up to about 50 inches every 100 years. Just ask an archaeologist. Oh, that must be it. Here, let's give this explanation a try. Sorry, honey, I know I've neglected to take the broom out like ever, despite 2 centuries of your nagging. You can no longer take trips to the store for groceries. How about we just compromise and build a front entrance on the second story and then call it a day? Does that sound about right? Yeah, I'm not reaching for the molding carrot they're dangling either. The mud flood was right under our noses this entire time, literally. You've been driving right over it. I think this picture's from, I think it's from Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. Our controllers have the balls to pave entire roads over old buildings and then built new cities on top of them. Here you see that they literally built a road on top of an old building. See what I mean? How embarrassing. The government really needs to fix those potholes, or else a car might transport its passengers into some sort of past civilization, and we can't have that. Might as well bring out the big guns now. This is only an introduction to the mud flood theory, but why not put on a grand finale wherever it can be afforded? Cue Stars and Stripes forever. The mud flood also arrived on American shores, thereby demanding that his story of the New World receive its own scrubbing. Yes, indeed, the United States Capitol building is where the mud flood narrative really hits the fan. We are told President George Washington laid its cornerstone on September 18th, 1793, but then wasn't completed until sometime in 1824. There are obvious problems with that story, as construction photos from September 2003 will surely show. Apparently, the same people who sponsored the 9/11 event had leftover crate loads of banana peels to throw around, because how do you explain stuff like that? Tell me, I want to know. If you don't have the faintest clue what I'm talking about, then there is a pink marker circling the masonry in question. Very few would be surprised to learn that the U.S. Capitol building complex is rooted even lower into the soil, but why the pillars leading to nowhere? Seems like a terrible way to keep dirt out, if you ask me. They can't possibly be recent additions to an extended tunnel complex, as they're in desperate need of a power washing. And look how they're perfectly aligned with the staircase. To claim the original front door isn't what we're seeing is certainly one way to agree with a convenient conscience, I suppose. The walls on either side of the pillars are covered, most likely telling us that the uncovering of the original entrance was only temporary or a slip-up. Probably just the quick temporary fix. What else are they hiding? It makes you wonder. What sort of people inhabited buildings such as this one at an earlier hour? Perhaps I will finally get around to taking a closer look at America's many other Capitol buildings. Mind you, we're not going to go over that all tonight. This is just the introduction to my mud flood paper. Well, here is an interesting structure. The building before us was either never buried, or we are pressed to conclude it was dug up out of the mud at a later hour. Because all one has to do is envision a street elevated some 15 to 20 feet. The bottom half of its windows would therefore be buried. A grand staircase leading up to the Corinthian pillars on the second or third story makes for a grand entrance, wouldn't you agree? How many similar buildings can we find all over the plain? This one in particular was located in Chicago at one time, and have you heard its origin story? It's a total joke. Here's what we are told. Construction on Chicago's City Hall, which is what we're looking at, began in 1882, but then immediately upon completion in 1885, its limitations had already become evident, just within a couple years, 3 years tops. The architects had designed an interior with ceilings far too high, LOL, for the average person. The windows were too small, the rooms too oddly sized, its corridors far too long, drafty, and dark. But most of all, the building is far too overcrowded. Bummer. From the moment of its completion, the city of Chicago deemed their new city hall an inadequate disaster despite dumping a reported $100 million into the project. Sounds like a repurposed building, if you ask me. And get this, in 1905, a gas pipe rupture resulted in an explosion which blew the roof off the entire building. Convenience. I'm wondering if the insurance company covered that one. And at any rate, perfect reason for a demolition event. All right, so I just wanted to cover that right there. And what I really wanted to look at tonight is the mud flood and Jerusalem. And I was saying before we began that I'll be talking about this in here. I don't need to repeat it. So the mud flood in Jerusalem. The thing about Jerusalem is that it's not a millennial kingdom city from what I can tell. It's sitting in ruins mostly, according to the earliest photographs, which cannot be stated concerning most other inhabited places of the world. I don't see any grand, palaces here, any huge, beautiful cathedrals and castles. Just look at the Damascus Gate. There's one lone figure wandering about, probably wondering how he got there in a daze. I even get the feeling that somebody got word that the photographer was coming and only recently managed to pull a shovel out. How was the road not lined with gift shops, and where are the Jews if the land was free for the taking? His story practically comes to a standstill after the Crusades. We are told of an Ottoman arrival in 1516 and the years of shalom which ensued. The walls which now define the old city were said to be built about then, around in the 1500s, which conveniently would be the end of the millennial kingdom. There was apparently one Jewish migration under Judah he Hasid, and in the whereabouts of 1700, but Zionism itself was only imagined by our controllers in the decades following the mud flood. Construction on the new city of Jerusalem would not begin until the 1860s. The British wouldn't even take an interest nor occupy it until 1917. You would think a city like Jerusalem would be bustling with pilgrims and the people who pat you on the butt to steal your wallet. But no. You will tell me that disproves my millennial kingdom theory. No, it doesn't. Quite contrarily, the ruinous state of Jerusalem only strengthens it. I will tell you the why in a little while. Better yet, why not go ahead and lay it out now? So this comes from almost everybody's favorite book, Revelation 18, verses 1 through 5. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babel, the great city, is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul ruach, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Interesting that there's still unclean birds. But I'm probably not supposed to notice that. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. That's the Ruach HaKodesh speaking, by the way. For her sins have reached into heaven, and Elohim has remembered her iniquities. Again, Revelation 18, 1 through 5. It says right here that Jerusalem has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul ruach, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. That is a telltale sign that Elohim has designated the roundabout and uninhabited wasteland, a place where the set apart are not expected to hang their hat, but also that he has divorced the whore as well as the land which she polluted. You will tell me it doesn't say Jerusalem, but Babel, and that my wires are crossed. We will have to disagree then. The place where Yahushua was killed has already been identified as Mitzrayim in Revelation 11:8, and you will recall those plagues. I recommend you crack open a Bible and read that passage for yourself, Revelation 11:8. Yahuwah never married Rome, nor Persia or Babylon. He married Yasharel. There are whorish women all over the world, but Yahuwah is not so concerned about them as he is his own covenant people. Well, Yasharel played the part of the whore. Eventually, Yehuda did too, going so far as to murder their bridegroom. Telling the set apart to come out of her falls perfectly in line with Yahusha's plea in Matthew 24. It also sounds a lot like Lot fleeing Sodom, which is the other thing about Revelation 11:8. Really, you need to read it if you haven't already. Jerusalem is also Sodom. And what does that equation spell? Sodom plus Mitzrayim equals Babylon. Now, the earliest documentation of Jerusalem I can find happens to be the drawings of David Roberts, all of which resulted from his 1838 trip to the Holy Land. The first photographs wouldn't be taken until 1844. By David Roberts' account, Jerusalem has been mud flooded. The pillar of Absalom, buried. The tomb of Zechariah, buried. There is the Damascus Gate again, faring no better. Jerusalem as a whole is caked in mud and has the look of a ruinous city, mostly, more like an exotic flea market in the desert. I'm not exactly sure on the dates of when these photos were taken, but They give the same details. Roberts wasn't lying. Damascus Gate, the Pillar of Absalom, the Tomb of Zechariah, all seemingly mudflooded. I showed you his sketches, his paintings first, but they match the photos. They complement each other. The only difference is that David Roberts has managed to round up more people to make Jerusalem look happening. There's barely a living soul in these photos. The bottom right photo is of the St. Stephen Gate, and it's just as much in disrepair as the rest. The only thing I find interesting about it are the lions on either side of the entryway, reminding us of the tribe of Yehuda. So you should be able to see it there. It's on the bottom right photo. You can see the lions there. Jerusalem as we know it today was nearly completely buried until not so long ago. This actually really surprised me, learning this. And that will, of course, come as a surprise to most people, seeing as how ancient the city is, packed with history. And the sheer number of pilgrims who apparently traversed these streets in the intervening centuries. You think somebody would have taken out a broom to sweep up the accumulating dust, but no. Look at that red line along the southwestern corner of the city. I didn't draw it there. There's no possible way that I could draw that straight of a line. I am showing you a screenshot from an Expedition Bible YouTube video. That's Joel P. Kramer doing the talking. He's an adjunct professor of biblical archaeology at Shepherd's Theological Seminary and demonstrating precisely how high the soil line went. It's almost to the top. How recent was the dirt pileup? If you tell me the 1800s, then you're cold, shivering. Either put on a jacket and mittens or give it another educated, albeit far more conservative guess. The 1940s, you say? Warmer, but wrong again. Nobody thought to pull out a broom and dustpan until the 1970s. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. Kramer's professor was a guy named Shimon Gibson. Well, Gibson was part of the ongoing excavations starting in 1973. So his professor, this professor's professor, was the guy who dug it out, Jerusalem. And according to Kramer, used to set his lunch in the arrow slot right above the red line. And Gibson is still a heavy-handed presence in archaeology, by the way, and he can attest to this. And what does that tell us? Somebody is still alive who can attest to the depths by which the city of Jerusalem was buried. The earliest known photographs of Jerusalem were taken by French photographer Joseph Philibert Geralt de Prangy. It sounds like a French dude. In 1844, and are barely legible. Still not difficult to conclude, however, that it's a city in ruins. I mean, from those photos, it looks like a city in ruins. That does not look like the holy city. But then what is going on in this scene? The curveball in the bunch is a sketch of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, another David Roberts original. Not simply because the riches and the elegance to be seen here completely contrast the ruinous city without. We are told that Roberts had a photographic memory. His other drawings prove that to be true. Well, look closely. Pretty sure that's a giant on the throne. The person on either side of him are dwarfed in comparison. They are bowing down and giving him homage. Assuming the individual standing on his right is 5 feet tall, then he would easily be a 10 or 12 footer. Was David Roberts telling us what no photographer was capable of? At least here, the city of Jerusalem appears to be ruled by a giant. Have you seen the doors to the Holy Sepulchre? They're huge. They couldn't even find a tall enough ladder for the lady standing there. I'm thinking she wanted to pull out a feather duster and give Jerusalem its much-needed once-a-millennium cleaning up job and around the door frame. But who really knows what she's up to? If I were her, I'd tell the cameraman to be a darling and pick up a shovel because, as you know, the southwestern corner needed some tidying up as well. Another thing I can't help but notice is that there used to be 2 sets of doors. The other was bricked over, as you can see. They built like 2 rows of arches there. I've seen some great home remodels in my day, but I am sad to say that I couldn't recommend these contractors upon my enemies. It is well known that Adolf Hitler was an aspiring artist, and there is a saying attached to that. They should have let the man paint. Well, whoever is responsible for these changes never should have been allowed near the blueprint. He shouldn't have even he shouldn't have even had clearance into the architect's building. Why would they block up the beauty of the sepulchre? Not enough foot traffic? Probably due to all the giants entering and exiting, I shouldn't wonder. Step back inside the sepulchre building, and we are treated to some interesting MK Tech potential. It is the dome which my eyes are initially drawn to. There are cavities included within the design, like so many others included in my Kings and Priests of the Thousand Year Reign research, reminding us time and again of cavity resonators. And so here is some review. In the world of electromagnetism, cavity resonators work through symmetry to produce oscillation or vibration of energetic particles. Symmetrical shapes force energetic particles or ions to vibrate in a constant manner, and bada bing, electromagnetic fields are extracted for use. I am seeing much more than a dome, though, and in such a small area. The horseshoe has become the most widely recognized symbol for magnets, and the rotunda before us is a horseshoe haven. We are treated to what looks to be 4 stories of arched columns. The columns and rotundas may very well have been designed as powerful coils intended to produce electromagnetism, carrying the current in loops. Imagine the energy harvested here at one time. Even the name of this tomb here, it's called the Aticule, if I'm pronouncing that right, which is said to be built over the tomb of Mashiach. So this is the tomb in the Holy Sepulchre. Looks very much like the baptistries that can be found within Gothic cathedrals and under dome structures of our realm. Albeit this is a grand design indeed. Really, you will need to read that paper to know what I'm talking about. I'm thinking it was constructed or construed as a central engine, working in partnership with the magnificent microwave or whatever it is that they were cooking up in here with all those cavity resonators and magnetrons. Take a look at it again from various angles, and it is abundantly clear that the pillared rotunda around it, or no, I'm sorry, on top, has been gutted of its engine. It's hollowed out. What I suspect may have resembled a tokamak or something very close to it. Otherwise, we are expected to believe it's an elaborate cake topper, only to be appreciated by somebody hanging from a very tall ladder. Ridiculous. It's simply incredible the amount of beauty lavished upon this architectural marvel on the inside when the outside looks as though it was patched up and slapped together by the Three Stooges getting hired onto the brick and mortar crew. Nothing about the Audicule or the tomb of Mashiach in the official narrative checks out. They tell us, I'm just murdering myself tonight with this word. The tomb of Mashiach, though I obviously really questioning whether this is the tomb of Mashiach. They tell us it was rebuilt in the place of an older structure after a fire in 1808. No, that is not a misprint. 1808. That is the date of the fire, mind you. What you're looking at was supposedly built in the 1800s. Does that look 200 years young to you? I was shocked when I read that. I'm like, there's no way that is 200 years old. Have you have you ever seen it in person? I have. I've been there on multiple trips. The structure looks aged, if I do say so myself. They couldn't have told me. Or they. Okay, okay. We got somebody jumping in here. Yeah, my mods and admins, if you could just take care of that. All right. They could have told me it was 1,000 years old, 1,500 even, and I would have believed those numbers. It's not like we're gazing at a weather-worn chapel erected above a windswept mountainside either. Breathing in all those incense fumes must have done a wonder on its health, I guess. It was being held up by an external skeleton on my last visit, just as this photo attests to. And as recently as 2017, it went through a year-long restoration process. The reason being is they were saying it was about ready to collapse in upon itself. Seriously? The first to document the tomb after the mysterious fire was none other than everybody's favorite sketch artist, David Roberts. His lithographs are dated to 1842, and the structure is said to be brand spanking new at the time. So it's not even 2 centuries old then, according to the 1842 date. And look at all that gold, why don't you? The entire place is glimmering. I will ask you to turn several pages back at Robert's other documentation of the Holy Sepulchre, the one involving the giant on the throne. His sketches appear to tell a very different story than what we're otherwise given, and I would argue how they play precisely into my theory that these energy and health centers were ruled over by kings and priests of the millennial kingdom. Now, I do apologize. There was a lot of Rivka effects in that. If you guys don't know who Rivka is, she's my beautiful young daughter who is often sitting on my lap when I am doing the writing and the editing. And oh yeah, I should also mention that she is an admin or a moderator in training here at the Unexpected Cosmology. I do apologize to a certain individual, I don't even know who. She she executed her power and deleted a comment. So I'm like, no, and I couldn't get it back. But so if anyone wants to look at the log and see what Noel Joshua Hadley deleted, that was actually our new moderator in these parts, Rivka. Hopefully that all made sense to you. And I want to move on and talk about the Whore of Babylon and how this plays into, I want to strengthen my arguments on Jerusalem being the whore and why Jerusalem does not look like London or Paris or Rome or some of the other beautiful cities around the world that I believe are Millennial Kingdom based cities. And I think it was probably just abandoned for the most part throughout most of it. It was just building up sand dunes and heaps and cockroaches and evil spirits. So this is called the Whore of Babylon. We're on page 23 if you need caught up. I'm stopping for a swig of coffee. Just about everyone gets the identity of the Whore of Babylon wrong, and I can't fault them for it. I did too for the longest time. Had Revelation been covered at nearly any other point during my adult life, I would have sat here and made a Semiramis connection. Seeing as how the woman from Buchanan's book, that would be John's book, exhumes all the familiar markings of the mystery religions. And in turn, the mystery religions ultimately derive from Babylon, obviously. I don't think that explanation is wrong. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's right. It's simply not the whole of it, when in fact the most obvious explanation has been slapping and assaulting us throughout the prophets. I dropped your very first clue early on when speaking about the destruction of Shalom's temple. Just so you guys know, we're no longer reading from the Mud Flood PDF. It's going to be a little dizzying tonight. We're looking at a lot of different material, and I am now covering my 70 AD paper. And this is one of the last entries in there. The destruction of Herod's temple was a repeated event. So Solomon's temple destroyed, Herod's temple destroyed. And why is that? I think you already know the answer, but I'll direct your attention to the prophets anyhow. What does this come from? This comes from Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu chapter 3. And it says, "They say if a man put away his woman and she go from him and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But you have played the harlot with many lovers, yet return again to me, says Yahuwah. Yahuwah said also unto me in the days of Yoshiyahu the king, have you seen that which backsliding Yisrael has done? She has gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there has played the harlot." It's the same thing as a whore. If you need that spelled out for you, you can just get out a thesaurus and find that one out. "And I said after she had done all these things, turn you unto me, but she returned not. And her treacherous sister Yehuda saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Yasharel broke wedlock, I had put her away and given her a sefer of divorce. Dun dun dun. Yet her treacherous sister Yehuda feared not, but went and played the harlot also." There it is, the whore. And it came to pass through the lightness of her whoredom that she defiled the land. Are you guys sensing a theme here? And committed adultery with stones and with stocks. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Yehuda hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, says Yahuwah, excuse me. Yirmiyahu chapter 3. Everything which needs stated regarding the whore has just been made. It's all there. Yasharel had already played the part of the harlot when Yirmiyahu gave Yehuda her final warning. It says Yasharel had broken wedlock and that she had furthermore been handed a sefer of divorce. That's referring to 10 of the 12 tribes: Reuben, Shimon, Yishakar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, and Manasseh. They were all divorced and removed from the land by this point. Only Yehuda, Levi, and Benjamin had remained. There's technically 13 tribes. You guys all know that, but we talked about the 12. It doesn't surprise me in the least that most Christians haven't the faintest clue about this sort of thing. The Jews, though, you would think they might be educated on this subject with all those bar mitzvah parties, but no. The Jews often get insulted at the menorah I light in my window when I am not being outright snubbed by them, and have even let me know I am a goy and therefore not permitted to these sort of religious rites. In citing the divorce of Yasharel as an explanation for the people whom I am grafted into sends nearly everyone into an anthropological tailspin. Sometimes a religious crisis ensues, mostly because the Jews have their own special invite-only club, and just about everyone seems content with the arrangement. Nearly a month ago, as of when I wrote this, a self-declared Jewish woman, totally appalled that a goy would incite the name of the Most High, finally confessed that she had never heard about the Yasharel divorce issue before, and thought that they had all been Jews going all the way back to Moshe. What do they teach in the schools nowadays, particularly at the bar mitzvah parties? Yasharel had become the harlot and was therefore divorced. In case you were wondering, that's a problem. Yahuwah keeps to his law, or the Torah, even if the Christians have done away with it, which is probably why I have never heard its divorce command taught by the boys down at seminary. And this is coming from Deuteronomy 24. I know this is a review for some of you guys, most of you, 99% of you, but you know how it goes. Deuteronomy chapter 24, when a man has taken a woman and married her, and it comes to pass that she find no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a sefer of divorcement and give it in her hand and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's woman. And if the later man hate her and write her a sefer of divorcement and gives it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the later man died, which took her to be his woman, her former man, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his woman. After that, as she is defiled, for that is abomination before Yahuwah, and you shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahuwah Elohika gives you for an inheritance. The Torah states in no uncertain terms that a woman is not allowed to return to her husband if he divorces her and she takes another man. Contrarily, a woman may return to her husband if adultery were not the cause and she refrained from taking another man after the divorce. But that obviously wasn't the case with Yasharel. They had already been whoring after other Elohim. It was a trend which evidently continued. Should those other Elohim in the surrounding nations tire of the harlot, Yahuwah had no legal rights to restore her to the land. And I think that's really the important thing in this argument. The land is a key ingredient in all of this. It is the land of inheritance given to the wilderness generation, which Yasharel could not return to. No, never again. A divorce from the land is final. Some people may argue that, but I think it says what it says. Otherwise, should they return in bulk, the land would be defiled, and that is an abomination to Yahuwah. It's not like Yasharel was left hanging, though. They most certainly were given another land to inherit. I have detailed its likely location in my People of the Covenant paper, which I also made into a video. You'll have to read that or watch it for yourself to see where I'm thinking. That's another story altogether, and I don't want to get distracted. The point is that they could never return, and in fact, as his story has shown, Yahuwah never brought them back. There was never another Exodus again. And so pay careful attention to Yirmiyahu's warning. He was reminding the Yahudim of the Torah when insisting that they also were polluting the land. And therein lies the tension. If they kept up with their charades, then Yahuwah may just go ahead and hand them a bill of divorce as well. So this comes from Yashayahu 54:5. That would be Isaiah. For your creator will be your husband. Yahuwah of heaven's armies is his name. He is your redeemer, the Holy One of Yasharel, the Elohim of all the earth. In dropping the Yeshayahu passage into the discussion, I'm simply trying to establish the fact that Yasharel had a marriage covenant with Yahuwah Elohim. For those of you who linger in doubt, the Sefer of divorcement principle is applicable to the man and his woman just as assuredly as it is with Yahuwah and Yasharel, because the Torah is intended on earth as it is in heaven. And I just realized something. I have yet to quote from the Whore of Babylon passage. How embarrassing of me. At least now you should have a widened peripheral vision in framing the picture. And so this is what it says in Revelation 14:8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. It seems like most people read a passage such as this one and conclude Rome is the destroyed city rather than Jerusalem. A futurist might claim some endless incarnation of the New World Order is being targeted. Neither of those two options can be accurate unless it can be properly argued that either option were in a marriage covenant with Yahuwah as Yasharel and Yehuda were. Now, some people might argue for that. Maybe it's the Roman Catholic Church. I don't know. But the beast most certainly is Rome, though he is never described as Babylon. They're two completely different locations. I know it doesn't outright say the whore here, but we're getting to that part. And, by the way, Rome was never in a marriage covenant. She's most certainly implied when the city of her origin is referred to in feminine terms. What's more, she is the fornicator. Imagine a woman giving herself to any number of men, all grouped around her in a circle while her husband is away on business. That is such an unattractive picture, but it's what is happening here. Yasharel, as well as Yehuda, were the women of Yahuwah, which is to say, they were hands off for the surrounding nations. Had either been true to her husband and those nations attempted to take them by force, then Yahuwah would have dealt with the rape of his bride accordingly. Though I think you and I both know he would have guarded his people so that nothing evil would have befallen them in the first place, as in a rape scenario. Protection obviously didn't happen for Yerushalayim. And why is that? She was a fornicator. She was the whore. And now for the Whore of Babylon passage, which you all arrived for. I suppose the best thing to do in a situation like this one is to lay the entire chapter out so that there are no accusations as to whether or not I am withholding information. Though seeing as how I have already covered the Beast of Rome, that would be my 70 AD paper, some of what is being described here will be a student review. So this comes from, I'm reading the whole chapter. Look at that, Revelation 17. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, and saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the ruach into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahusha. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. And of course, you guys will recall that in my 70 AD, the glorious appearing of Yahushua HaMashiach paper and video, I went over the the seven kings. Actually, no, it was in a different video. Whatever, it's all in the same paper. Sometimes I even get confused. The beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The seven heads are seven mountains, on which the woman sits. And there are seven kings, five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And we got a big old 11 right there. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which thou saw, where the whore sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For Elohim has put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Elohim shall be fulfilled. And the woman which you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. Revelation 17. The beast you have already been introduced to, as well as the identity of the seven kings. Names were dropped on an earlier page, and I don't care to repeat them again. The parts worth covering have been highlighted for you. It seems as though the futurist, often but not always in partnership with the Zionist, paint the picture of a New World Order religion which the beast hopes to create. A superficial one at best, because hardly anyone skims over the part where the whore is naked and burned with fire after her adulterers have tired of her. I don't suppose there's anything in this passage alone which will convince you that the futurist perspective arrives some 20 centuries too late in the theology game. The total disconnect between Revelation and 70 AD is by design. Whether past or future, according to what I've already shown you, I think the case of Yehuda being the whore is a strong one. Those who insist it is the RCC have to make the case as to how the Vatican was ever in a marriage covenant to begin with. What makes the whore's fornication particularly potent is that she is drunk with the blood of the saints. Who killed the prophets again but the Yahudim? Babylon, the city, didn't kill the prophets. No, Jerusalem did. And I'm talking about Babylon, the ancient city, with Nimrod and all that. She murdered her bridegroom, and that is no small detail. Again, the disconnect being made regards the total destruction of Jerusalem and the Jews being uprooted from the land. I'm thinking a separate divorce has been given, which would heavily imply Yehu is done with the land once and for all. It's over. There may be other lands which the Most High Elohim has planted the people of his covenant in, but Israel isn't it and never will be again. You shall see why I've come to that conclusion soon enough. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I think it is so important that Israel is the historical land. It's one of the reasons right there. That changed everything for me. People are looking all over the world. Was it South Africa? Was it Europe? Was it North America? And I'm telling you right now, if North America is ancient Israel, I want out. Get me out of here. People make the threat all the time. Whoopi Goldberg says, if such and such person is elected, I'm leaving to Canada, and they never follow through with it. Well, if you can show me that North America is the land of ancient Israel, I want out. I'm not supposed to be here. And I don't think that Yahuwah would plant his people in a place where they're not supposed to be of this level of toxicity. Before I do, would it surprise you to learn that the whore was an actual woman? I bet you never saw that coming. If Revelation was turned into a movie, you never thought they'd be capable of casting the whore for a starring role. But like the other players already discussed, she too was a living individual. Certainly a woman. Not much of a lady, though. She even has a name. Berenice of Cilicia. Sometimes referred to as Julia Bernice, or Berenice, though much of history simply knows her as Bernice. She was a Herod, you know, specifically the daughter of Herod Agrippa. She's in this picture, looking bored, unamused, perhaps even annoyed at having to miss out on the latest episode of The Kardashians while her social media friends are abuzz about it. I don't know, maybe I have the wrong century, I don't know. Don't quote me on this one, but I think that's Paul giving testimony right there. Wait, I checked. He is Paul. The scene derives from Acts of the Apostles, and here's what it says. And as he thus spoke for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, or Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. For the king knows of these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, believe you the prophets? I know that thou believes. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost you persuade me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would to Elohim that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except these bonds. And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor and Bernice, there she is, and they sat with them. And when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, This man does nothing worthy of death or of bonds. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, This man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. Acts 26:24-32. There she is, the whore of Babylon, in the Bible, identified. She also makes an appearance in Acts 25:13 as well as verse 23 of chapter 25. I didn't quote from those pages because they're just as uneventful as the Paul trial. Here is how every encounter goes down. Berenice enters through one doorway or another, finds furniture to sit upon, and then leaves. Nothing too scandalous. Perhaps I should include them, though, best to cover my bases, because you never really know. So here we see in Acts 25:13, and after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came into Caesarea to salute Festus. I could sit here and tell you there's nothing more to digest in the given scenario, but it is quite possible that you see something which I don't. It's why I'm taking the time to go through this, because discovering the villains is a community effort. As a writer, I have often found that bumbling my way through the den of iniquity is the best way to have the bad guys unmask themselves. And believe it or not, it works. It works 7 out of 10 times. Let's see if the next one is one of those instances. Acts 25:23. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus's commandment, Paul was brought forth. I'm not reading anything incriminating here either. And Berenice might very well have been a perfectly good little spoiled princess with all that pomp required for her entry into a room, according to these passages. You might be wondering why I'm thinking to target her in these 3 separate passages then. It probably has something to do with her affair with Titus. Forget about him already. I said I wasn't going to hold your hand while crossing the street through the 17th chapter of Revelation because we'd already gone over the different Caesars, or the Kaisers. He was one of them. Speaking of which, look at what we read about Berenice on Wiki. I'm not going to read that fine print right there. One of the reasons, I copy and cut out and paste Wikipedia into these articles is because I have written entire articles on Wikipedia articles only to have them change them on me. I mean, it's maddening. And you go back and it makes it look like I'm just like rambling, like making stuff up that, they never said. So it will take the Mandela effect, I guess, to change these articles. Berenice liked to rock the cradle, apparently, because Titus was 11 years her junior when she fell in love with him. She furthermore backed the Flavians during the year of 4 emperors in 69. A mighty big risk. Recall your history, how the Herods backed the wrong man during the civil war that rocked the Roman world in the years following Julius Caesar's death. Herod the Great went with Mark Antony rather than Octavian, resulting in a lot of groveling and butt kissing after Cleopatra pulled off that ridiculous serpent stunt. I still think it's a hoax, but whatever. The lovebird routine paid off with Berenice. The Flavians' rise in the empire required all the numbers in her pocketbook, but love conquers all, I guess. With Vespasian declared emperor, it is Beatrice and Loverboy who stayed behind a honeymoon in Yehuda, of all places, and squashed the rebellion. The aftermath of her love affair was one which ensured that Herod Agrippa II would be the last of the Herods. But who really cares about the brother when Titus owns a Letterman jacket? If she wears her dress just right, it might be hung over her shoulders. Might as well throw the Jews into the bus while she's at it. Their little tirade ended with the temple destroyed of its very foundation, Jerusalem up in smoke, and 1 million reportedly dead. You've heard stories about girls with daddy issues running off on the back of a motorcycle with a dreamboat boyfriend, fueled with false promises, but this is straight up ridiculous. Daughter Dearest aided in the total destruction of her granddaddy's kingdom, and she spent her entire fortune doing it. And you thought Paris Hilton needed a spanking. And then here we see here, I don't know, more information I thought was important, which I will now comment upon. The idea that the whore saddled up to the beast in Revelation is an obvious sexual imagery, and it appears as though Berenice was straddling the beast, quite literally. When in Rome, the opposition of some of you might have relies upon the fact that the whore was burned, whereas the fate of Berenice is not known. Isn't that only slightly suspicious, though? I thought the Romans kept adequate records. I mean, consider everything else we know about her. It took 5 years for Berenice and Titus to reconvene in Rome after their romp through the Yehudan countryside. Certain senators hated her, according to the wiki article, though Cassius Dio writes that Berenice was at the height of her power there, living in the royal palace and acting very much as one would expect of the emperor's wife. Despite selling her country and her countrymen and even her own soul for an appointment in the queen's chair, Titus turned her out in an instant. All it took was a public denouncement by the theater people, OG, and she was tossed out of the palace. Did she return to her redneck brother in the desert pond she so despised? We're not told. She simply showed up in his story, playing a whore of such biblical proportions that Jerusalem was destroyed, and then slipped away because of the criticism of staged actors. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if her demise was scrubbed, being equally as biblical, and the controllers can't have that.